The mission of One Book, One New Orleans is to break down barriers that prevent folks in our community from accessing books. I can tell you one-on-one how we do that because it's a 10-minute spiel and I really don't want to take up the time. But long story short, if your barrier is poverty, if your barrier is low literacy, if your barrier is incarceration, if your barrier is homelessness, we are there trying to break down that barrier and put a book in your hands. We do that 365 days a year. I'm really not exaggerating when I say that. So when you come to Words and Music and you donate and you buy tickets, that's the work that you're supporting year-round. And speaking of ticket holders, remember that we had said the Patty Friedmann Writing Competition ticket holders would be automatically entered to win a $25 Community Book Center gift card. We're doing 2 this session because I'm feeling love. Sunny Rosen, are you in the house? Come get you a gift card. So we're supporting 2 local independent booksellers this festival. Candace with Tubby and Coos Traveling Bookshop is here. Community Book Center, where you're getting a gift card for, is next door. So you can shop here, get your books signed, and then walk next door and find more treasures. And Sid Galicia, are you in the house? Sid. No Sid yet. If he comes in, we'll give him a gift card. Y'all all eat, you're too skinny. And we will enjoy the reading. Thank you all very much for being here, and thank you to Peauxdunque Review for your partnership. Tad Bartlett from Peauxdunque Review, take it away.
Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you, all of you, for being here. I really want to thank everybody who entered the writing competition this year. Each year, the quality of the entries gets better and better, and we are so honored to be a part of this process and be a part of putting writers on the pages of our review. The winners and runners-up, who you'll be hearing from, are all going to be in issue 10 of Peauxdunque Review. This is issue 9, which just came out. And we're blessed. This is the conclusion of our 5th year involved with the conference and with the competition, and we couldn't ask for a better way to sort of give back. It's just such a part of our own mission as well. So I'm going to start, we're going to kind of skip around between the short stories, the creative nonfiction, and the poetry. Everything you hear is going to be amazing, other than me, so I'm going to make my remarks short. Matter of fact, that was pretty much the extent of my remarks. We're going to start with our short story runner-up, Megan Morrison. And before you come up, Megan, I would like to read a little bit what our final round judge, Sahar Mustafa, had to say about your runner-up story, Sensory Overload. Sahar said that the writer produces a frightening world through vivid, cringe-inducing imagery. There's at once a satirical and tragic tone as the protagonist, Amelia, battles her way home to be at her father's bedside. Her visceral loneliness and solitary journey mirrors the awful lived experiences of pandemic victims while cleverly dispensing with artificial hope. Originally from rural Mississippi, Megan is a multidisciplinary writer currently living in northern New Mexico. She holds an MFA in dramatic writing from Carnegie Mellon University and is the co-creator of the podcast Nobody Reads Short Stories, which is going to change, right? Her fiction has appeared in Nashville Review, the Maine Review, and Kestrel, and she was a 2023 Looking Glass Rock Writers Conference Scholar. Megan is a member of the WGA and Puppeteers of America, and she co-founded Erosion Films, a production company dedicated to increasing the climate conversation through comedy, family-friendly musicals, and campy horror. Megan?
Hello, everyone. This is Sensory Overload.
When Amelia gets the call that changes the world, she is trapped in her office cubicle trying not to die. Her coworker, Jim, stands beside her and lists all the different colors of sand he saw on a recent trip to Hawaii. There's black sand, red sand, white sand, even green sand. Amelia holds her breath while marinating in the orbit of his cloying aftershave. It wreaks havoc on her senses. This early in the morning is the worst because the application is fresh. With every breath, her eyes burn as though she's taken a huge breath under the ocean. The sting travels through her nasal passages, behind her eye sockets, all the way down into her lungs. She coughs loudly, hoping this will send him away, especially with everything in the news lately. But Jim only pauses politely and then starts up again as soon as she collects herself. The sand isn't pebbles, Jim says. It's actual rocks, big rocks, little rocks, all mixed in together. From Jim's description, Hawaii is a planet alternate from Earth, a vivid environment, the bluest of blues, the greenest of greens, and the blackest of blacks, as though all colors have been turned up to their fullest saturation. She can't help but wonder why the rocks are black in the first place, but she doesn't ask Jim. She doesn't want to encourage him to stay longer. She wants Jim to walk away, but she can't tell him outright to leave. He's her coworker, and she can't be rude. She must keep the peace. So Amelia stays silent, weathering the negative moment in hopes of a positive long run. In 6 hours, however, none of this will matter. The long run is irrelevant. The white sand is bright white, Jim says, not tan or cream or beige or taupe, but actual white sand, as white as toilet paper. His words pick at her like crows. She is restless with overwhelm and exhaustion. Amelia imagines a beach of bright white sand expanding bigger and bigger until it completely consumes her, like an explosion in a movie that fills up the entire screen, taking everything into oblivion. It's Tuesday, and Amelia spent the long weekend with her boyfriend's family. 2 stepmothers, 7 step-siblings, a couple of babies, they could be brothers or grandchildren. Amelia can't keep it straight. They love to play games like Monopoly and Risk, games that never end. Robert's family talks nonstop, over, around, on top of each other. No one flinches, no one tires, everyone laughs. Amelia comes from a family of 1 mother and 1 father who mixed genes to make 1 daughter and 1 son. Family time was the 4 of them in the car driving to see medical specialists and sitting in testing rooms for days on end, their arms covered in the swelling bites of single-use testing needles. Everyone rotated around the room like they were on a demented carousel, each revolution presenting the prize of being allergic to something else. Once they returned home from testing, the 4 of them scattered to their respective corners to process their winnings alone. At the cabin, Amelia tried to sneak off to the lake pier for solitude, but Robert's stepfather found her and pulled her in for a hug. His thick sweater smelled of dog and wood smoke. "Come back inside," the stepfather said. "Tell us what you know." The cabin was alight with scented candles, which gave Amelia intense brain fog. She struggled to follow conversations, her thoughts stuck in the tar of her fatigue. Fatigue so thick she could feel the weight of every single one of her cells. They were as heavy as river rocks. They pulled her down onto the couch. She pointed her nose toward the open window, seeking out fresh air. She dozed off, surrounded by the crackle of gregarious chatter in a toxic plume of apple cinnamon. At the office, Amelia nods absently at Jim's droning and twists off the cap of her inhaler. It's not a prescription inhaler like the kind for asthma, but a small herbal inhaler you breathe in through your nostrils. The essential oils inside soothe her inflamed nasal cavities, but the mucus keeps coming. She grabs another tissue. Then there's the red sand, which looks a little bit like brick. It's that red, Jim says. Most of the red sand beaches are secluded. People like to go there for privacy. Jim whispers the word privacy, but he could have just shouted, "To be nude," for all of his subtlety. That's when Amelia's cell phone rings. Her brother's name pops up on the screen and her heart clenches. Brothers only call with bad news. "Excuse me, Jim," Amelia says, "I have to take this." "Oh," he says, frowning, disappointed. Amelia darts around him with her breath held. By the time she's in the stairwell, her brother has hung up and she must call him back. "What's wrong?" she asks when he says hello. It's their dad. He had a stroke. Massive. This is when the world swells. Amelia watches the flecks of yellow and white glow from inside the dark gray concrete walls. The shine of the glossy paint on the railing sparkles. I want to talk to him, she says into the phone. Are you with him? He's in ICU. No one can see him, her brother says. No one can see him. These words float around in Amelia's head. She takes them apart to make sense of them. Can one see him? No. Him see no one can see him. Can no one? She imagines moving through the hospital room after room, floor after floor, only to find empty bed after empty bed. Amelia is suddenly in the hallway of her memory. She's 11 years old, walking room to room in her childhood home, searching for her father, but he's nowhere to be found. In the stairwell, a noise from behind Amelia startles her. She turns to find Carol, another office co-worker, propped up against the stairs, dabbing at her nails with polish. She catches Amelia's eyes and sighs. My manicurist has that nasty crud that's going around, Carol says, frowning at her nails. I'll be glad when they reopen the salons. Amelia immediately covers her nose with the cuff of her sleeve and holds her breath. Amelia? On the phone, her brother sounds like he's right next to her, even though he is 2,000 miles away. The black sand Jim saw in Hawaii materializes before her like a charcoal swamp, surrounded by emerald green foliage, capped with an azure sky. Under normal circumstances, Amelia might tell her brother about Jim and the black sands. He might find the banality comical and they would share a joke, but there is no such thing as normal from this point on. Carol continues to dab her nails with polish and Amelia continues holding her breath. I'm coming home, Amelia says in a voice stuffy and strange. A wave of ocean slams against her and she feels the grit of the black sand on her face, in her mouth, on her teeth, in her ears. She wants to fall over and be carried out as the wave pulls backwards into the depth. But the water sucks her feet firmly into the beach, stabilizing her, keeping her rooted in her present. Her brother says, okay, and hangs up, and with one more anxious glance at Carol blowing on her wet nails, she heads to her cubicle. Back at her desk, Amelia grabs her bag. She's now holding back tears as well as mucus. Jim is right there, slapping her once more with his aftershave. Everything okay? He asks. No, my father just had a stroke. I'm sorry to hear that, Jim says. His voice is so genuine. Do you have to fly? Yes, of course I have to fly, Amelia says, leaking. Maybe you should take the train, Jim continues. A lot of folks are getting sick on the planes these days. He's right. Flying is not the safest form of transportation right now. Jim's concern pecks at her. She feels something loosen inside and uncoiling her chest as large as a ball of rattlesnakes. It's only a matter of time. Black sands, red sands, white sands. Amelia pictures the beaches in her head, hoping the uncomplicated color scheme will calm her. But fear burns, wiggly and venomous in her throat. It moves across her jaw, up her cheeks, across her eyes. She's going to explode. She heads out of her cubicle, but Jim blocks her. His eyes are glistening orbs of empathy. His aftershave is a noxious gas of death. You don't look so good. Are you okay? He asks, leaning in, trying to catch her eye. And that's when Amelia lets out a violent sneeze, wet and messy, sending all the sniff-back snot and deferred tears exploding upon Jim's open, unsuspecting face. Jim freezes. A thin strand of mucus, not his own, hangs from his bottom lip. Jim's eyes turn into saucers as he smacks his lips, his face turning as red as the red brick sand he described earlier. Amelia doesn't know what to say. What is there to say? So she moves quickly down the hall. Other co-workers pop up over their own cubicles like prairie dogs, eyes wide in anticipation. She pushes through the door to the stairwell and clambers all the way down to the parking lot. Once in her car, alone, she screams. A scream so loud the roar pounds against her eardrum as though she's taking flight. It's not painful, or there is pain, but the pain is good. It's a relief, because for a second she's drowning out her brain. To the outside world, the scream is a screech. The screech is a torment. She's screeching and pounding on the steering wheel when the security guard knocks on her window, silencing her. Through the glass, he sounds muffled, like he's from another time. Miss, he says sternly, you can't do that here. Amelia turns to face him, doesn't turn to face him. She knows if she looks at him, the raw, ugly emotion on her face will destroy him. As in the past, when she's shown her true feelings, this man will turn immediately to dust, and she has enough problems. She pulls down the car visor to look at the mirror. Her eyes are bloodshot and puffy, her cheeks are blotchy, her neck is red and itchy. Mucus crusts around her nostrils. She left the tissue upstairs. She picks away the dried snot as best she can with a glove box napkin. From the road, she calls her boyfriend Robert and tells him about her father. Meet me at the airport, he says. I'll take care of your ticket. Robert says other things after that, but Amelia doesn't hear him. She's trying to picture her father. She's back in the small house of her childhood looking for him again, through the 4 rooms in the hallway that connected them. She goes from room to room to room, dizzying herself, but he is absent. She conjures the ocean lapping in the cold, black Hawaiian rock sand. There's black sand in Hawaii that isn't black sand, isn't sand with black rocks, she said to Robert. I'm booking you on Atlantic, he says. They're the only airline that hasn't had a plane quarantine. This is what she loves about Robert. He sees a room full of fires and he reaches for the closest bucket of water, and she imagines the extinguishing water to be his bright blue reflection of the sky. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan. And the rest of that story, along with the part that you heard, will be in issue 10 of Podunk Review. I've had to ask our readers each of them are going to give you, largely going to give you truncated bits of their winning work so we can fit in readings from everybody. So they're leaving you wanting more, I'm hoping, and that's kind of the goal here too, is to want more. So next we're going to hear from the winner of our category for writing by public high school students. This is open to public high school students nationwide. The winner is Carolyn Zhang from Woodbury, Minnesota. She's a junior in high school there in Woodbury. She is going to be joining us from a conference room at her school, which she has until 1 o'clock, so we're going to get her in just under the wire. Her winning story is called The Tapestry. The final round judges for this category is the editorial board of the review, and we had this to say about her winning piece. In this very strong piece, the author packs all the stages of sexual assault and its aftermath into an intensely packed 4 pages of manuscript woven around a motif of colors. This all could easily have gone wrong in lesser hands, a motif too forced, punches pulled, nuances ignored. But this writer has the immense skill to succeed and avoid these pitfalls. The result is a story that hits hard, a story that affects and changes the reader. Caroline is a 2-time gold medalist in the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, and her work has been recognized by the New York Times, the Center for Fiction, and the Blue Fire Editorial, among others. Currently, she is working on a collection of short stories with themes of memory and observation. So we're now going to turn our attention to the screen where Caroline is going to read from the Tapestry.
Thank you. I'm just going to begin. Purple. The bruises on your hips from that night, the wine-stained dress on your floor. You haven't bothered to pick it up yet. Not when touching it feels like an iron, not when he had no problem picking it off you as your pride. You turned in a mirror, searching for the skin he never touched, which is hard given the way his hands traversed your entire being, uncharted territory under his palms. They say that human skin cells regenerate themselves every 7 years. In 7 years, your body will be gone again. Somehow, you feel like 7 years is too long of a wait. Carefully, you press down on one of the plum-bitter bruises that tamper your chest. In 2 weeks, the bruises will fade from your skin, yet you can't help feel like they will never really disappear, whether you wait 2 weeks or 7 years. You turn away from the mirror. Purple has never really been your color. Blue. Your favorite painting is Portrait of a Girl by Marcel Janca. It's 15 different shades of blue, and it's one of those paintings that everybody's heard of, but nobody's really seen. The type with a pretty name, but an ugly face. The girl in the picture has stock white hair, pasty skin, tattered yellow clothing. Her face is indignant, yet you can't stop looking at her. You wonder if that's how he felt that night, when his staring drowned out the attempts you made to run away, to call an Uber, to leave as fast as he would let you. You close your eyes, feel his gaze up your spine, undressed in the pitch black of the night, where you can't see yourself breathe. He seems to have memorized every shade of blue on your body, yet his eyes never leave. You are a portrait of a girl. Green. The bile on the floor when you got home that night, the color of his eyes in the darkness, charming to sinister in a matter of seconds. Your arms swayed to the beat as he watched from across the dance floor, emeralds glowing under the disco overhead. He had called you beautiful when he didn't even know you. Just by your face, he was immobilized in the cords of his eyes. You curled against his breath in the room he dragged you to. You felt the green on your body, peering into your crevices as his hands moved wild. You fell when you got back to your apartment. Vomit spat from your mouth in chunks, dripping over the floor in a putrid shade of olive. Darkness fades into your vision as you slump over the carpet. Even in the dead of sleep, you can still see flecks of green. Yellow. The color of your favorite sweater you wear the next day at the police station. The technician comes in and asks you to take off your shirt. The police office is bleak and stony. Like a child, you cling onto the wall like a security blanket. You didn't shower that night. Good thing, too, as a cotton ball is swatched between your legs with gentle fingers. The buttercup shade of your sweater smiles up at you from a chair, even as your hands bleach against your sides. It reminds you of the police officer, coaxing last night out of your head, saying, "These details are important so we can recognize him. What else do you remember?" You tell him about the green eyes, the purple dress, the strong hands you couldn't squirm away from. Privately, you think forgetting will be a blessing. Orange. The flicker of the fireplace you sit in front of when you tell your parents. You're home for the holidays. You sleep in your childhood bed for the weekend. You sit next to the fire. The words fall from your mouth in a moment of despair. He hurt me. I said no, but he hurt me. That night, you learn what it sounds like when your father cries. You hear your mother's heart breaking in her chest. And horribly, your family begins to treat you like a glass doll, tiptoeing around your scars, voices quieting when you step into a room. Your dad tries to hug you from behind, and you flinch on instinct. You brush the hesitation in his eyes as he freezes and pulls away. You try to reach out to say, "It's okay," but no one dares to touch a burning girl. You go to bed with your childhood nightlight on, watching the halo of orange it casts upon your wall until you fall asleep. Red. The color of the paint one of the activist girls hands you to dip your hand in. Your therapist told you to join the movement. "You can do this," she said. "You're a survivor." So you do as the girls instruct. Undress, but leave your bra and underwear on. Dip your hand into the paint. Put that stuff all over your body, in every place he touched you. Verbatim. You stand, red paint on your hands curdling like blood as it begins to dry. Cautiously, you press one palm to your stomach, your hips, covering yourself in handprints. You shudder. You can feel his hand in every place the paint cools, and you want to hide away. But the wave of girls behind you has other plans. They parade onto the street, red handprints on their thighs, their chests, their shoulders, holding signs. People on either side of the road stare at you as you pass by, and it's like they can see right through you with their taut gazes and their odd faces. They're surveying you just like he did, eyes raking the handprints on your body just as cruelly as he made them. So really, what's the difference? You are a tapestry woven of colors you didn't choose. Tapestry of a scene you never asked for. Everywhere you go, you are a tapestry. You are on display. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caroline. We won't be hearing today because you couldn't make it from the runner-up in the Writing by Public High School student category, but that is Ida Schenk, who is a local poet who goes to NOCA. So I just wanted to give her props while we're here. Our next reader is going to be the runner-up in our creative nonfiction category, Jen Halleman. The final round judge of the creative nonfiction category was Hannah Petard. Hannah had this to say about How to Grieve the Living, Jen's runner-up piece. How to Grieve the Living begins with an engaging anecdote. A grandmother who, years before her death, begins bequeathing her inheritance one trinket at a time, and blossoms into a personal investigation into transgenerational manifestations of behaviors, both good and bad. It is very much a story of the stories we tell ourselves. Jen is a writer and bookseller living in Washington, D.C. with her family. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in Diagram, Sierra Nevada Review, Creative Loafing Atlanta, and others. You can learn more about her work at www.jenhalleman.com. Jen?
Hi, to grade the living. In the years leading up to her death, my grandmother took to giving away small pieces of herself. "This is probably the last time I'll see you," she told me one dusty summer day when I was home from college, slipping a gold cuff bracelet engraved with her initials into my hands. On Thanksgiving a few years later, she sent me back to my stark Atlanta apartment with a vase made of paneled glass depicting bright bouquets of poinsettias. My roommate put the vase in the dishwasher, and the color peeled away from the glass like a sun-shriveled corn husk. The vase had been inexpensive, but I still mourned its loss. My grandmother and I both took pride in our ability to curate beautiful things, to create an artful home. I had inherited that gift directly from her, and along with it, disdain for carelessness and acts of mindless ruination. My grandmother didn't leave a will, so after her funeral, her 6 children and 13 grandchildren raised her house to claim the inheritances we believed were rightfully ours. My sisters and I collected crystal dishes that had once housed candy and petite bouquets of violets, and a refrigerator magnet that read, "When the going gets tough, the tough go to Grandma's." In a box tucked away in the closet, I found a collection of postcards I'd sent her from abroad, and childish chicken scratch poems I'd written for her 20 years ago. I kept those things and added them to my own box of mementos I kept back in Atlanta. To run my finger along the fine ridge of her initials on the gold cuff bracelet, or to hold in my hands a piece of paper that she had touched, those physical objects fostered my grandmother's memory. Yes, but it was more than that. They were reminders of the pieces of my grandmother that lived inside of me. They were proof that, because I had shared so much so deeply with this woman, she would never be all the way gone. My father is not dead, but he is gone from my life. "You wouldn't exist without me," he told me the last time we spoke. It was early 2021, and COVID-19 vaccines were finally being dispersed. Like most of my friends and family, I was waiting for an email notification that it was my turn to get a shot. As I waited, my father and I spent hours on the phone, first discussing and then fighting about the logistics of our family's first in-person celebration of Orthodox Easter in 2 years, which my father had marketed to me as a small family reunion that would end months of pandemic-induced isolation. However, he failed to mention that he was also inviting several members of his girlfriend's family, all of whom were strangers to me and all of whom had attended a large bachelor party in Florida a few days earlier. When I learned of the expanded guest list from my aunt, I told my father I was upset that he had concealed this information and that I wasn't sure if I was comfortable attending the party. He accused me of being controlling, paranoid, and clannish. He asked me questions. How could I be so unwelcoming to his girlfriend's family? And how could I be sure that the vaccine would be effective? And why couldn't I simply just trust his judgment? He was my father. If I owed him my life, I certainly owed him my blind faith. 2 years later, he would leave a voicemail on my phone, blaming our disagreement on the strain of the times. "Lots of people fought back then," he said. "They all managed to get over it." I imagine he's at least partly right about this. I'm sure plenty of families had some version of the same argument after living through 4 seasons of unprecedented stress in a world shrouded by pandemic desolation. I'm sure plenty of families reconciled once life became recognizable. But for me, this type of conflict was already unbearably familiar. I had lived it dozens of times over. I was 28, battling with my father over personal safety during a global health crisis. I was 15, listening to him scream at me in the stairwell at church for treating his girlfriend with disrespect. I'd failed to smile at her promptly when she arrived late to the service halfway through my favorite hymn. I was 12, listening to music in my room, trying to drown out the sound of my dad downstairs hitting my sister with a belt. I was 10, finally slipping my shoes off at 9 o'clock at night after sitting by the door for hours, waiting for my father to pick me up for a bike ride. I was 6. My parents had divorced 3 months ago, and my older sister was stashing crackers and Girl Scout cookies underneath her bed, so we could barricade ourselves in her bedroom when her father's new girlfriend visited for the first time. We had expressed to him that we did not want to spend Christmas break with a stranger whose relationship with our father had catalyzed our parents' breakup. He told us not to be territorial like our mother. For decades, with unpredictable vacillation between violence and apathy, my father made clear to me that I as a person, as his child, did not matter to him. My sisters and I would not exist without him. We owed him everything, and he owed us nothing, not even the affection or stability that children require to thrive. When we questioned his unpredictable standards or behavior that I now recognize as volatile and selfish, we were failing him as daughters. We were unworthy of the kindnesses he bestowed upon us. And there were kindnesses, enough of them that my confidence in our estrangement often falters. Each winter, I recall the year he lived in an apartment complex that forbade real Christmas trees, when he decorated a potted plant to the nines with glittering garland and miniature Christmas ornaments. When I'm hiking out west with my husband, I acknowledge that my love of nature was born the year my father took us to Yellowstone and spent 2 weeks driving us from mountain to mountain, stopping at gem shops to stuff velvet pouches with quartz crystals and obsidian, posing us in front of waterfalls to take photographs that would hang on his walls for decades to come. Surely I shouldn't let all of those lovely and loving moments go to waste. Surely the beautiful places we have been together could compensate for everything that has gone wrong in our relationship. If only he'd learned to tame his temper or mitigate his violence. If only he'd show some remorse for having hurt us so many times. If only he'd listen. If only he'd realize that love is not a sometimes kind of thing, especially when it comes to your daughters. The phrase thrums in me like a heartbeat. If only, if only, if only. I did not attend my father's Easter party. We have not spoken since. So, though he is not dead, he is gone from my life. Because he has not died, he has not bequeathed any of his treasured keepsakes to me, nor have I happened upon them in his empty house after his demise. My paternal inheritances are less tangible than that. Before I was born, I'd already inherited my father's big feet, arched brows, and dense musculature. We share sharp tongues, the tendency to fluctuate between studious and playful, with few gradients of moderation in between. Our affinity for mint chocolate chip ice cream, for ice cream in general, the weak link in our preferred diet of berries and cottage cheese, slices of grapefruit, rare red meat and green salad, and bowls of steel-cut oats sweetened with maple syrup. A few weeks ago, I described to my therapist an out-of-the-blue text my father had sent, a SoundCloud link to a Catholic sermon on forgiveness. The text felt strange and out of touch on many levels. Neither I nor my family have ever practiced Catholicism. I have not spoken to my father in more than 2 years. He has neither apologized nor asked for my forgiveness, only implied that it is my duty as his daughter to forgive him for any transgression he makes. After all, I owe him my existence. My therapist raised an eyebrow. Are you sure the two of you are related? She joked. I thought back to a day in LA spent visiting a friend. While my friend was at work, I borrowed her ocean blue beach cruiser and rode 20 miles on a beachfront bike path, turning around at the mile 10 mark to seek out an ice cream snack. It was a perfect blue sky day that reminded me of long bike rides on the towpath with my father as a child. Our relationship was fraught even then, with my sisters and I caught in the midst of our parents' contentious custody battle. But I liked riding fast on my bike behind my dad, the way the wind whipped my hair and cooled the slick summer sweat on my cheeks. 6 or 7 miles in, we'd stop at Country Made, an ice creamery attached to an orchard in the middle of rural Ohio, fueling up for the ride back with raspberry or strawberry or peach-flavored ice cream. Yes, I told my therapist, I am certain we are related. In the past, I treasured at least some of my paternal inheritances. Someone would comment on my feistiness, and I'd attribute it to my father's Sicilian side of the family. My tendency to grumble when displeased, the Greek in me, also handed down by him. My self-professed good taste, expensive taste, my husband calls it, can be traced directly to my father. We share the perspective that cheap is cheap. Always pay more for something that'll last you a lifetime in style and quality. We have strong opinions and err toward the dramatic. We are perfectionistic and ambitious. Living in the off-puritanical Midwest, we encountered criticism for many of these traits. Until recently, I dismissed that criticism as cultural incompatibility. Thanks to my father, I wasn't born bird-boned and blonde, and I wasn't raised to be so demure I might wither into a white Ohio winter. As I graduated from high school, I moved to Atlanta, then Denver, then DC. I became more comfortable with the boldness my father passed down to me. I took pride in it, even. I deeply appreciated the hum of his intensity when it manifested itself as kindness, when he drove across the country in the snow to bring me a car with brand new brakes on New Year's Day, or when he met me in the North Carolina mountains to celebrate my birthday. In those instances, I saw that he was capable of an intense level of care, and I was proud to notice that same intensity in myself when I went out of my way to make room for friends and family members who needed me. But since our relationship ended, I have questioned these similarities. Perhaps my intensity does not set me apart from or make me superior to my milquetoast former classmates in suburban Ohio. Perhaps my intensity is in fact a character flaw, and the fact that I take pride in it makes me a narcissist like my father. Perhaps my father's presence in my genetic code is a curse. Our behavioral similarities, the curse's manifestation. My father will always live inside of me, and if he lives inside of me, he will never be all the way gone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you for making the trip here to be with us today. Next, we're going to turn to our poetry category. The final round judge in that category was Ariel Francisco, fantastic poet, translator. In fact, he'll be on the translation panel later this afternoon. He chose as the winner of this category a poem called For Once I Pretend I Am Not Afraid of Tenderness by Sammy Helgeson. Ariel had this to say about Sammy's piece. Beautiful in its vulnerability and vivid imagery, you can almost hear the heart beating in each line. I found myself rereading it over and over again. The poem crystallizes that sense of tenderness for us to see, hear, and almost touch with stunning effectiveness. Sammy is a poet with a BA in environmental science. She grew up in the driftless region of Wisconsin and now lives in the high desert of Denver, Colorado. Currently, they are fascinated by glaciers, tectonic forces, and the mess of youth. Sammy's poetry has been recently published in the River and South Review, Barzak Magazine, and Everybody Press Review. Her work has received support from the Lighthouse and Kenyon Review Writers Workshops. Sammy is joining us today from the high desert, and she's going to be here on the screen, so turn your attention there.
Hi everyone, honored to be here. This is my poem, Once I Pretend I'm Not Afraid of Tenderness. You are the beer in the library, the only light gummed to the wall. You sense my stirring and turn on every time. The spider in your bedroom, how it filled the emptiness of night without us. Watching a star, a comet, a satellite float across the sky, an empty soccer field, like children in adult bodies looking up to God. Searching for deer ticks between leg hair, our toes a wedding ring quilt on the bed frame, smearing fig on each other's skin, lapping it up like hounds. The dream of kissing you in the cemetery, or doing it maybe. Our noses touching as we watched Moses flee Egypt. You are the round of applause as the plane lands, the power comes back on. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Sammy. We don't have our runner-up from the poetry category with us today, but our runner-up was Maggie Hess. She comes from Knoxville, Tennessee. Her poem was Portrait of a Matriarch with Melon Slices. This had to have been one of the more difficult categories. Like I said, all of the entries in all the categories were fantastic, but I particularly did not envy our poetry editor, Christopher Romagera, in calling down the finalists to send to Ariel, because it was just a really, really packed category. So now we're going to turn back to our creative nonfiction category, and we're going to hear from the winner in that category, Elsie Mitchie. This was where I knew I was going to mess up by having too many pieces of paper. All right. Hannah Petard, again, was the final round judge in that category, and she chose Elsie's piece, Trashformations, as the winner of our creative nonfiction category. Hannah wrote, part memoir, part love letter to New Orleans. Trashformations is nearly elegiac in its approach to the genre. At turns introspective, vulnerable, and surprising, this essay walks a zigzagging temporal tightrope, transforming itself page by page and insight by insight. I couldn't stop reading. Elsie has a PhD from Yale University in English and a BA and MA from Brown in Comparative Literature. She has been a dean at a Quaker boarding school and lived on a dormitory with 150 teenage girls. She has been a nanny for an American embassy family in Moscow. She has taught English at Yale, Wesleyan, Tulane, Swarthmore, and LSU, and published books and articles on Victorian fiction. She is completing a memoir entitled Mixed Reviews. One chapter, Broken Ornaments, appeared in the Southern Review. Another, Surface Tension, was longlisted for the Page Turner Mentorship Award. A third, Transformations, is the winner of the Patty Friedmann Creative Nonfiction Award. Elsie?
I think this will be the right height from here.
Yeah.
Good.
Since we're here, I thought I'd read the last 6 pages of my piece, which is the love letter to New Orleans part. The first time I went to the French Quarter on Mardi Gras Day, I was both entranced and overwhelmed. The crowds became too much. I left the friends I had come with, wandered off on my own, and went down to Jackson Square, where I crossed over to the river on the moonwalk, a bridge named not for a celestial body, but a Louisiana politician, and sat by the banks of the Mississippi watching the tugs and barges ply their usual business as gulls circled lazily above them. Being beside the water always calms me down. I heard a sound behind me and turned to see, appearing on the brow of the levee like a mirage, a parade of people in costumes, some attired as Egyptian priests wearing high golden hats and carrying the ankh. They marched down the wooden steps to the water's edge as the band played a dirge. Their leader scattered something on the face of the waters. The music changed to an upbeat version of Down by the Riverside, a song they play at traditional New Orleans jazz funerals. The crowd danced off and vanished back into the city as if it had never been, as if I had imagined it all. The year Alex and I made our Barbie hats, he invited me to march with him in a counterculture parade he knew about called St. Anne's that starts in the neighborhoods below the French Quarter, the Bywater, and the Faubourg Marigny. It goes up Royal Street to meet the parades of Mardi Gras Day, Zulu and Rex as they come down St. Charles to end their runs on Canal Street. Alex and I met it just below the bottom of the French Quarter outside a restaurant that no longer exists called Café Brazil. We got there early and watched as the crowd gathered in a square surrounded by restaurants and cafes. Everyone is welcome. People come in whatever strikes their fancy. One year, Alex found balloons on the internet that were 4 or 5 feet in diameter. I made sacks to cover them out of fabric as light as gossamer with gold moons and stars on silver background. We brought a helium tank down to New Orleans from Alex's lab and filled the balloons with gas so they were lighter than air. They floated behind us like aerial dogs on a leash. When we were standing waiting for St. Anne's parade to begin, someone came up to me and said, "I love big, shiny, round things," and gave me a silver-painted Zulu coconut, the most coveted throw in Mardi Gras. I saw the Pope on dope, pulling a little red wagon behind him with a sanctuary in it. I saw crossing guards on the highway to hell who blew whistles and held up signs that said, "Yield, you know you want to." The bands came, Casa Samba playing Brazilian music, others playing marching tunes, holiday music, the Mardi Gras Mambo. People brought spirit poles, 8 to 9 feet of PVC pipe with hula hoops suspended at the top, hung with the brightest of multicolored metallic ribbons. Streamers that floated out behind as we marched, bouncing to the rhythm of our walking, the beat of the music. Everyone was dancing, and I was one of them. We trailed clouds of glory. We didn't throw anything, but people on the wrought iron balconies on Royal Street showered beads down on us. Brightness falls from the air. After we reached Canal Street, the parade took a break, then a small part of it reformed and headed back down into the quarter toward Jackson Square. It crossed over to the river. There, its leaders performed a ritual that, I learned later, started when AIDS began to decimate the gay community in New Orleans, much of which is located in the lower French Quarter, the Marigny, and the Bywater, where St. Anne's starts. They scattered the ashes of people who have died during the years over the Mississippi River. As I stood there watching, I suddenly realized, this is what I saw that day so long ago. This is what they are doing. But I am no longer sitting there as an onlooker, peering into someone else's life like the way Barbara Stanwyck does at the end of Stella Dallas, taking a bittersweet pleasure in the spectacle of a happiness that is not mine. I am an insider, a performer. I am part of a parade that marks both joy and sadness, whose members both dance and mourn. This is what Alex has given me, this feeling of insideness. What New Orleans has given, not just me, but so many others. The city is a place of rebirth. It even has a band called the Rebirth Brass Band. In it, myths come to life as Orpheus and Iris and Endymion and Muses roll down St. Charles Avenue every year at Mardi Gras. Once, when the parade dedicated to Proteus, the god of change, went drifting past my window, I leaned out to watch the spectacle. The crowd was begging for beads. The music of the marching bands was pulsating. The floats were decorated with mystical medieval symbols that no one else seemed to notice. But I was an English professor, a reader, a dreamer. I knew what they were. They were the symbols alchemists used for the elements, the magical processes they believed would allow them to transform lead into gold and find the elixir of life. When I first met Alex, I gave him a copy of John Donne's poems. I wanted to say to him what Donne wrote. I am every dead thing in whom love wrought new alchemy. New Orleans meets death and disaster with a resilience grounded in merriment. When Katrina hit the city, it seemed as if nothing would ever be the same. There were blue tarps on roofs and debris everywhere, and people were living without power for months and rescuing what they could from houses that had filled up with water. One of my friends saw a giant manta ray lazily swimming through someone's living room as he was attempting a rescue. That was the time when there were advertisements everywhere that depicted a small child whose lip was stained with a white mustache. They read, "Got milk." After Katrina, some unknown, unterrible New Orleanian created stickers and buttons that read, "Got mold," because the streets were lined with refrigerators that had to be thrown out for trash after the months-long power outage had ruined them. When I saw the bumpers and bumper stickers, buttons and bumper stickers, I thought, what else, where else would people create a joke about a Category 5 hurricane that almost destroyed a city? No one thought Jazz Festival would happen the year of Katrina, but it did. The organizers assumed no one would come, but people were lined up outside of the gates waiting for it to open. Bruce Springsteen came and played what he later said was one of his best concerts ever, filled with dirges for New Orleans that came from folk music and American history. Oh, Mary, don't you weep no more. My Oklahoma home is blown away, and how can a poor man stand such times and live? He ended with the ballad he wrote himself, My City in Ruins. He was not the first musician to mourn the inundations that threatened the city. Randy Newman has a hauntingly melancholic song about the Great Mississippi Flood of 1927, when the water rose to unheard of heights. He croons that there were 6 feet of water in the streets of Evangeline, that the river rose all day and all night, and evokes Louisiana, Louisiana, lamenting that they're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. Louisiana is always besieged, always about to disappear. It lives perennially in the foul rag and bone shop of the heart that William Butler Yeats describes in The Circus Animal's Desertion. Yet it creates out of that garbage, that trash, those disasters, what Yeats calls elsewhere, beauty born out of its own despair. But it isn't a beauty that lasts. For Louisiana, and perhaps especially New Orleans, loves what is impermanent. It creates food and music and festivals, things that you make and enjoy, tastes and sounds and sights that are transient, consumed, and gone. Then they reappear with the rhythm of the year, coming back even when it seems impossible. In 2021, the year of COVID, Mardi Gras was canceled. You would think that would be that, and the city would be in mourning and lockdown like the rest of the world. But it wasn't. Once it became clear that there would be no official parades, private individuals hired companies like Blaine Kerr and that make the floats for Mardi Gras. That year, they made decorations for houses instead. New Orleanians called it Yard Gras. You could drive around the city and see residences from big mansions to tiny shotgun houses that were covered in huge flowers or fairies or mermaids or dragons, depending on their owner's desires. I saw a house that was decorated all over in larger-than-life images of snacks, like Cracker Jack boxes. It had a tree out front where you could pick bags of Doritos and Cheetos that had been tied to the limbs. Without parades, there were no official kings and queens, but banners everywhere proclaimed, the people are king. Louisiana celebrates the ephemeral more than any place I have ever lived. It creates experiences that are like the St. Anne's Parade, magic in the moment and gone the next day. It believes that you should, in the words of its own mantra, let the good times roll, the way the floats roll down St. Charles Avenue. I belong to a Baton Rouge Mardi Gras crew called Crew of Yazoo that does lawnmower formations in loving mimicry of the formations the marching bands perform in the big New Orleans parade. My Baton Rouge crew always has topical punning themes. The year after Katrina, we were Noah's Ark and marched 2 by 2 as different pairs of animals. My partner and I were pelicans. The crew begins to get ready for Carnival right after New Year's Day. We practice every Sunday from Epiphany, the day the Three Kings saw the baby Jesus and New Orleanians start serving king cakes, until Mardi Gras. Depending on when Easter is celebrated, Carnival can be early, in which case the crew performs an easy routine, or it can be late. Then we do a more complicated one. But if the weather is bad on parade day, we don't march at all. Our costumes are made from foam, and we would be drenched like wet sponges in the rain. When I told this to my friends up north, they were appalled. Why would you waste time working on something that might not happen? I don't know how to explain, how to convey to them the wonder of being part of a force, the energy and delight of a group, a crew, that creates the possibility of a miraculous event. Such performances are not velleities, not dreaming and doing nothing. They require work and practice and making, the way I made Alex's jacket, the way we made our Barbie cats and all our subsequent costumes. The making matters, even if the event doesn't happen. New Orleans knows bitterly that there's no counting on things, no consistency, no constancy. But there are, over and over again, moments in which you can suddenly become part of something spectacular. You can walk, as I did with my Baton Rouge Mardi Gras crew, as a character from the Beatles' Octopus's Garden. My lit-up tentacle foam arms made swirling motions in the night sky as I performed drill formations to DNCE singing. Everyone laughed as we danced. New Orleans has taught me that you can get off the couch and put Barbie on the cross or become your lover's teenage crush. Your imaginings can become part of something larger. Crew, festival, traditions, community, city. You can do anything, but only for a short time. Like a bird that glides gorgeously past your window, hinting at optimism, and then disappears into the night.
Thank you, Elsie, for that. I have to say, being a literary journal based in New Orleans, but aspiring to be a journal for national and international contributors, which we have succeeded in being, we're always way tougher on Louisiana or New Orleans-centric pieces. It's just we don't want people to see, oh, that's just that New Orleans journal. I'm not going to submit to them. So that made it through our preliminary readers and then our final columns and finalists to get to Hannah is a real testament to just the beauty of and the skill of writing. You are working against our own natural So before we turn to our last reader, I do want to say a quick word about the one category from which we're not going to have any readers here today, and that is our Beyond the Bars category. This is a category that's open to incarcerated juveniles nationwide. Free entry, $500 prize money, and it's just to be able to encourage them in finding that sort of restoration and reconciliation and freedom of spirit and hope that may be hard to come by where they are. The winner of that category this year was a young man by the name of Willie Cherry. Wrote several beautiful pieces. One of them is also an honorable mention. Unfortunately, he is not with us because he was an incarcerated juvenile by the time he entered, hit 18. He's now heading over. This category.
Take your time. Take your time.
The runner-up is a poem by a We have been honored to have runners up in that category with us in previous years and hopefully again. So, with that, I'd like to turn to our final reader, the winner of our short story category, Emily Rodriguez. Emily's piece, So Bien, was chosen by Sahar Mustafa as our winner. Sahar had this to say of Emily's story. In this touching piece, the protagonist, Cosme, is presented to us with tenderness, wit, and humor, and navigates a new phase of adulting. Her search for a roommate leads Cosme to an unlikely treasure and gutting revelation. The writer deftly avoids sentimentality in a fresh and inventive exploration of grief via popular and beloved consumption. Ultimately, the writer has us consider the poignant intersections of ancestral bonds, self-determination, joy, poems, and belonging. Emily Rodriguez is a Latinx writer originally from San Diego. She's the editorial assistant for the Southern Review, an MFA candidate in fiction at LSU, and the former editor-in-chief of New Delta Review. She is also a 2023 Sunrise Academy of the Arts resident. Her favorite spaces to write about are the magical, the real, the painful, and everything in between.
Maybe the shortest one, just adjust it. Before I begin reading my story, I did want to make a quick statement about the genocide that's happening in Palestine. I think it's really important for us to recognize that. And so I stand here expressing my solidarity with the people of Palestine. I stand with their anti-colonial struggle for freedom and for self-determination, and with their right to resist occupation. I stand firmly by Gaza's people, the victims of the genocidal war that the United States government continues to fund and honor with military aid. The crisis compounded by the illegal settlement and dispossession of the West Bank and subjugations of Palestinians within the state of Israel. I invite writers, editors, journalists, scholars, artists, musicians, and actors, and anyone who does creative and academic work to join and call for us to intermediate ceasefire. Join us in building a new cultural front for free Palestine. If you want to learn more about this statement, check out Writers Against the War in Gaza. It's very important, and then we don't forget it's happening. So, with that in mind, my story is called So Bien, and I'm very grateful for Sahar Mustafa for my story. I'm very honored to be here. The only context you need to know before I move on to reading, as mentioned in the statement, is that a young woman named Peauxdunque, she is in need of a roommate, and she finds one from the older woman at a thrift store. Her name is Clemente. So here we go. A week after we met, Clemente moved her son to the apartment. Peauxdunque helped bring in some boxes, but Clemente refused any help. Can I put this up? Clemente said, holding up a small wooden box. Of course, there's some nails and a hammer in the closet. You're so prepared. Much better than my daughter. Peauxdunque made herself a cup of tea. Clemente started settling little pieces of herself across the apartment. Across the top of the dining table, motives, front racks, and an embroidered dining cloth. This is beautiful. Did you make this? Yes, my mother taught me. It's an Okomi style embroidery. It's so beautiful. These days, people are ripping it off and selling it at Urban. You know the place. Okomi? My family's Okomi, or maybe in general. I can't speak it very well, but I know the word. Cosme traced the embroidery with her fingers, and flowers and vines, and so many animals stretching across the fabric, and reds, greens, blues, yellows, and pinks. Huge beetles, birds with extremely long tail feathers, rabbits, butterflies, all stylized. They didn't have much detail, but their shapes were made with so much care. It was an explosion of light. Can you show me how to make one? Maybe. I'm trying to figure you out first. You saw me cry at a thrift store. How much more do you need to know? It's a maybe. Let's leave it at that. Clemente always had her coffee in the morning with her biscuits and blasted music on the old stereo she had brought with her. It was a find at the thrift store, and fine wasn't enough to learn and steal. Still, Cosme expected alabanza music due to the cross, and instead was meant for Korean throat singing. It's voila. There remains such emotion in the music. Cosme learned to remember 6 a.m. to discover any meaning to the music. But hey, the part got clean, Cosme did like it. It 17 times each day. If she missed a sneeze, she would throw pepper in her nose until she met her quota. Rosamond did not know what would happen if Clemente sneezed more than 17 times. There were 4 months into the new arrangement, Clemente agreed to show Rosamond how she created her tablecloth. Clemente had received 2 postcards from her moms, each one featuring animals it hadn't seen in years, and several pictures and phone calls. Now, Rosamond had turtles and deers in the frame. Rosamond's parents had met Clemente once, when she yelled at their neighbors that went up and for encroaching on her serranos in the community garden plot, and Rosamond had them on FaceTime. They called Clemente boyfriend. This is the type of cloth I prefer, and your moms can send it to you from where they're at in Mexico. I know they're in at home, but I'm sure they have stores that sell this fabric. It's not just in the home. Clemente picked up a pencil and said, "Don't use great drawing skills. It is traditional to draw in freehand." Clemente used the pencil to outline shapes on the cloth, showing Rosamond as she detailed out the scene already on the tapestry on the table. You embroider within the shapes you make. Using a pattern is for wimps. But it's my first time, and I do actually suck at drawing. Pobrecita, said Clemente, covering her lips at Rosamond. A baby can't draw. Shut up. Fine. Over the next few weeks, Rosamond breathed in Clemente until she was all she thought about. She would log off work and wait for Glenn, as she now called her, to get back from the thrift store so that they could embroider together. Normally, these plots could take months, but together they could complete one in a few weeks. In the meantime, she received another postcard, this time a long-tailed wood partridge. You know, they say the animals they first used for pony embroidery came from cave communities living this one day. They had been stitching for a couple of hours. Clemente stretched her neck, taking a break to down the hill. I feel like we belong in caves at this point. Quietly, keep stitching. Clemente scowled, but smiled at Rosamond when she thought she wouldn't notice. The seams lining the edges of Rosamond's body were finally locking in place. Mija, you think you can take me to the doctor? Rosamond lay on the floor, with a pillow over her face. It was quiet time, so she knew it was serious for Clemente to interrupt her. Clemente stood at the entryway of the kitchen, her hand resting on her neck. What's wrong? I'm getting old. I need a tune-up. Rosamond stood up, grabbing her keys. No, seriously, what's wrong? Clemente stepped on the cardigan, moving gingerly. If I knew, I wouldn't be going to the doctor. Rosamond said, "That's just not true, Glenn. They're not just a diagnostic tool." "That's true. You're not even good for that." Rosamond waited in the doctor's office, reading a magazine in Spanish. Trying to read it. Clemente walked out of the office, a prescription in hand. "Everything okay?" Clemente nodded. "Told you, I'm just getting old." "You're not that old." Rosamond handed Clemente her cardigan in exchange for the prescription. Clemente took it in her hand, sliding the fabric through and bringing it. Rosamond noticed the chips on Glenn's nail polish, flecks of lead on her palm. Rosamond felt a flutter deep in her blood, small pricks digging into her organs and leaving scratches. "I'll be late on the rent this month," Clemente said. Rosamond shook her head and took Clemente's arm. "Don't worry about it." "Can you read to me, boss?" Clemente sat in the armchair in the corner of the living room, her hands resting on the book. "I've been trying to read for the past hour, but my eyes have been straining." Rosamond laid on the couch across from her. "Sure, what are you reading?" Over the past week, Rosamond noticed Clemente weakening. Her legs moved slowly, while her wake-up times got later and later. Each morning, Rosamond would hope to see Clemente already up, blasting her music and drinking her coffee. But now she was the one starting the clock early in the morning. Even then, Clemente would get Rosamond away whenever she tried to help her walk. Rosamond knew Clemente was getting worse as she was asking for help. "There's something I used to read to my daughter." "All right. Do you want some tea to drink while I read? Maybe manzanilla?" "Tea, honey. Muchas gracias." Rosamond went to the kitchen for a good tea. She had to let the smell of the manzanilla fly down, breathing in and out the steam. She took a deep breath, a piece of salt on one of her lips. She grabbed her legs and rocked onto the bed. Rosamond knocked Clemente at the kitchen table, head smelling of her magazine, compromised still warm. Music played faintly in the old stereo she brought with her. Rosamond pressed 2 fingers to Clemente's neck, feeling nothing. Rosamond called her parents. "I think I need a business address." Dolores picked up the phone. "What, boss? Thought you were actually going to try. Don't give up. You're just being a chicken. Are status benefits. Her daughter. Great. Should call her. See, I knew you could do it. I gotta go home. Postman hung up the phone and called 911. Postman waited as he came in, asked questions, and then took the men's body. She flagged one of the police officers down. Do you know the name of her daughter or her number? Is your name Postman? Yes. You're next of kin. It says your other daughter died 4 years ago. Postman felt something try to fall out of her eyes, feathers flying in her throat. What do you think? We're not related. Whatever you want. They didn't have pictures together, not even a video. Postman had a cross, a stereo, and a tablecloth. She grabbed the unfinished piece they had been working on and wrapped it around herself, and held her in place. Postman entered the message room and sat on the bed. A green lamp, colorful scarves, another cross, and some pictures scattered across 2 of the dresses. Postman picked up one of the smaller pictures. A young woman smiled into the camera, holding a little girl in her arms. The little girl was pointing something off camera, tugging at Clementa's arm, to show her what she was looking at. Postman clutched the photo to her chest and lay back on the bed. She gripped the unfinished father's hair, letting the loose threads sink into her skin. It took root in her bones, spreading across her veins and taking over her muscles. It felt itchy at first, a quiet drag of the cloth through her skin, and then it calmed to a simple, smooth hug. Slowly they wrapped around her body, around the photo, until she was cocooning in a web of fibers. Postman didn't care that she couldn't move anymore. Everything that threatened to spill out of her, everything that she knew would seep onto the floor and make a mess, was held together. She didn't have to worry. Distantly, she could hear a phone ringing. It wasn't her. 3 sharp knocks sounded at the door. Postman, abre la puerta. No one answered, and then I noticed in the apartment. Mija, ¿dónde estás? No one's heard from you in a week. The apartment was serene. Music played on the old stereo. The window was slightly open to let movies. They checked Postman's room first, finding no one. Then they checked Clementa's room. On the bed lay a massive blanket. In the center was a woman, her hair spread out, one arm holding her leg as they rolled in. Her other arm reached out towards the edge of the fabric, grasping at something. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. So that is all of our readers for today for this. I really want to thank Megan and Jen and Auntie and Emily for coming to be here with us today. I want to thank Caroline and Sandy for joining us on Zoom. I want to thank Nathan and Alex for making that happen there in the back of the room. So everybody, enjoy yourselves for the moment. I think the next session starts up at 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock? Right, 2 o'clock.